Welcome to Faith Over Breakfast. You are listening to a podcast by Pastor Eric Deepen and Pastor Andy Littleton. If you enjoy Faith Over Breakfast, we encourage you to rate it on the Apple Podcast app, on Spotify, or Google Play. Thank you and enjoy the podcast.
Welcome to Faith Over Breakfast. My name is Andy Littleton. I'm pastor here in Tucson, Arizona at Mission Church, and I'm sitting with my friend Eric, 50-year-old Deepen from the Village here in Tucson as well. And
Yes.
today, we, as many of you, got somewhere in our news feeds or our evening scrolling information about the leaked Roe v. Wade opinion. That's probably the wrong term for it, but the opinion that could overturn Roe v. Wade that's been shared by Politico and others. And we are just on the very front end. This is recorded the morning after that leak was mentioned in the news. And we are just talking about our initial thoughts as pastors hearing about this. And so we hope that you find this conversation enriching, helpful, and ultimately that the ways that we describe the desires for our churches, that you would join with us and do such things.
Yeah. Thank you, Andy.
Check.
Yeah, there you
Check.
go. You're good. All right.
Hey, good morning, man.
Good morning. I got some sparkling
water. That's good. I just finished my coffee right before I showed up, so I'm ready. I had breakfast.
I just have to say, on another subject, that I'm 50 years old and I finally fully celebrated, and I can just live into it. So,
yeah. What changed?
Well, I had a huge party.
Oh, okay.
There were 90 people.
Whoa.
And a jumping castle. I had the first jumping castle.
Was it for you, the jumping castle?
No, it was for all my friends who are children.
Okay.
I have lots of friends who are children.
How many of the 90 were children? About 85?
Yeah. Most of my friends are under the age of 7.
That helps you accept your age and feel young. Yeah.
It does. No, probably. Really, there was probably 15, 20.
Yeah.
Who were kids.
50-year-old Eric. Wow.
Okay, I just had to put that out there. I'm now the old man of the podcast, and I want to take as much credit for that as possible.
Yeah, we're almost exactly a decade apart. This is the year I turned 40. So
Yeah,
it's pretty wild.
It is pretty wild. I also want to make one other comment before we dive in, and that is that we have a third person today, and he will be part, and he doesn't really care a lot about who's talking. It's Mr. Cricket.
Oh, Mr. Cricket.
Yeah, he started the podcast, so we have really good mics, so it's going to pick up Mr. Cricket, so you're going to hear him.
Yeah,
and he's really loud.
Yeah, well.
And then he's probably really loud in my headset set.
Yeah, I can hear him in my headset.
We're going to turn off his mic there. Okay.
Oh, nice. Didn't change much.
No.
Well, yeah, Mr. Cricket, welcome. So
he's on one of the more intense podcasts, I think. This is going to be
so?
This is going to be a serious podcast.
Yeah, so essentially, I just texted you and said, "Well, I think the big thing on the minds of a lot of Americans and people in our church is going to be this leaked opinion on Roe v. Wade and what that means." And it's interesting because people knew this discussion was going to happen; these court cases were coming that were going to bring it into question, but to have this document leaked before the decision is made is a unique thing. It creates a situation in which the court will now be continuing its discussion while the culture responds, and I think the intent of the leak was for that to happen, and it could be an interesting time. And by interesting, I mean rough.
Yeah.
And I think that what I wanted to talk with you about was not so much like, let's have the abortion talk and talk about abortion, but just when you see this and think about your church,
Or just think about myself and this,
or just you, or
as a citizen.
Yeah, I mean that's. Yeah, what are you?
It's a lot.
How are you feeling, and what are you praying for and wishing and hoping for and worried about?
Well, number one, I think, two things have happened that I didn't think would happen in my lifetime.
Yeah.
One, I never thought there would be a land war in Europe, and there's a land war in Europe. Number two, I never thought that it would ever be possible that Roe v. Wade at any level would be turned over.
Really? Yeah.
Because usually the courts just support law. They rarely overturn themselves.
Sure.
They do, but they rarely do that. And they've kind of shown that they don't do it on Roe v. Wade. So I just never thought it would happen. Now here it's very possible that it's going to happen. This is a majority opinion that could possibly change. This is not that they could still uphold.
Which would mean, of course, that it would become a state-decided issue. Yes. And then the question that brings up is, I mean, of course, there are the issues of people who feel like, which state am I in, and does it support my opinion? Right. But then that also just brings up the issue of the division of our country. Mm-hmm. How does that? I mean, and I'm not saying it shouldn't be divided over certain issues. I'm not. I'm just saying it makes that a very real consideration. Right. And so anyway. But this you were saying you didn't expect to ever see that.
No, I never expected to see that.
You were just kind of in a place where you're like, I may not think this is a good law, but it's just one that's always going to be there.
Right. Well, if you just take it from a citizen perspective, without the gospel, without Jesus, just for a moment, when I think about it's a bad law. Yeah. And the reverse would be bad law. There's a lot of complexity to this law. And I think sometimes we think that we can take something like abortion and say, all right, we're just going to make a blanket law about this. Right. And we don't think about how it's going to play out. What are the best ways of helping people? Right. You have to have a complex structure. Right. Sometimes things are so much more complex. And so I don't really...
When you're thinking about that, I mean, I'm sure that these are all fresh thoughts. If anyone doesn't know the format of this podcast, we don't sit down and map out, here's the argument. Yeah. We sit down like we're getting breakfast and we process through something, and you get to sit with us.
Yeah, in the processing pro.
And so that's where we are. Yeah. But so just in the, when you think about the complexities, what are a couple that jump out to you? No expectation that you're going to nail them all and get them all right now.
Well, honestly, let me just first say, I think abortion is wrong, and I don't think anyone should get an abortion. I do think that there are times when a child may need to be aborted due to the safety of the mother and some other complications.
And it feels like most people understand that. Yes. Yeah.
But what happens is, I also realize that I live in this pluralistic society of which compromise is necessary to get best outcomes. Because you can't get a best outcome if one community controls the narrative all the time, or controls this particular narrative and says this is how it's going to be and this is the way we're going to do it.
That statement right there is huge, because not everyone feels that way. Right. Like that there's, and I'm not picking on you on that. I'm just saying the idea that there's a calling potentially to Christians to live in a pluralistic society in which they think what's going to be effective to keep peace and order amongst everybody. Right. And that is gravely complex. I am with you in that I personally look at abortion and I just don't see any moral beauty or goodness in the practice.
It's very terrible.
Yeah. And so I don't think that a society that says my right gets to, cause someone else to not be born or to be killed at an early stage that's not a good sign for a society. That's not even if you were just to base things on like, even if you were to go evolutionary and say survival of your species, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
It's not pragmatic. And then from the point of view of like goodness and morality and love, it's an issue. So with you on all of that, but I do think that there are differences within the Christian community on the view of kind of what could be, that you could believe that, practice that, hope for that, even vote toward that, but understand that you don't want to just like throw your pluralistic society into disarray as you do it. Like it'd be more the incremental conversation about anything, and just the complexity of going, so I'm living in two kingdoms in a sense.
Yes.
And that may even be a theological trigger for some people. I don't utterly espouse the view that connects, to those words utterly. But there's something to where it's like there's a kingdom of God that doesn't align perfectly with the kingdom of this world, though I believe the world would be blessed to come under the kingdom of God as much as possible.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. No, I think that's very correct. I think that the church is called to demonstrate the way it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
And so,
agreed.
And not only that, it is to enter into the community and care for it, in the places where things are disposable. So when people become disposable, then the church is to show up there and welcome the disposable into its own space and make them not disposable.
One of the most powerful statements from someone who was not pro-abortion, speaking publicly, it had to be Mother Teresa, I would say, when she said, "Give them to me."
Right.
And it wasn't what's wrong, like you're horrible. It was just give them to me.
Right.
And often the church has not felt to the world as if it's been saying, we'll absorb
certainly
the difficulty here. And that's a hard thing to do and say.
Right.
But yeah.
So I think, though, also with humbleness, the church is also to say, look, what we think the world is doing is wrong.
Right.
And in a society where we have a vote,
right,
and we can speak because of free speech, we will do that.
Yep.
But what I think is dangerous is sometimes when the church is not seeing the success it wants, it chooses to pick up some of the coercive patterns and habits of the world in order to get what it wants.
Yep.
Or it tends to it sees the world as its enemy, and becomes what it hates. And so I think it has to be careful. So there's that.
Yep.
The other part is like, what is a good law when it comes to abortion, right? How do we sit and compromise? And I think some of that is believing that if with gentleness and care we push for particular kinds of laws that give, when I was in the 80s, there would be stronger abortion laws if the Republican Party hadn't insisted on, they wouldn't give rape clauses or in life of the mother clauses. They just would fight tooth and nail for that when they could have probably gotten some of the restrictions they wanted if they were willing to compromise. Yeah. This is how it's been historic. It's all or nothing. And all or nothing thinking is dangerous because you don't have any compassion built into all or nothing thinking. So when I look at so all that said, now we're headed into, it's going to be pushed out to the states. If the Supreme Court overturns things, the states are going to have to decide. And in some ways that's fracturing us even more.
Well, right. I mean, and that's a genuine concern. I'm not saying that concern negates the concern about this issue. I'm just saying it's a real, when you just look forward and you go, what could this mean? Say that, 25 of the 50 states decide to have the stricter laws. That means another, even more visible physical shuffling of people that people would gather more in their tribes than even before, even physically, just changing states. And then there will be people who can't afford to change states of both persuasions that now feel stuck in states that don't have their viewpoint will be increasingly feeling angry, and so you're going to have a lot of conservative rural folks who just feel more disconnected from their states, and then potentially, I mean, both liberal and conservative, urban, who will be probably even more feeling that, because they'll feel like they're in the midst of an urban center in which they don't have their opinion isn't understood or heard, and those kind of that leads to when people start forming militias and stuff. You go, that's not great. Now that I'm not saying that. I mean, maybe that's just the consequence that will occur because of the state of things, but that's not good. That's not ideal. That's right. And so, but at the same time, I'm not ready to say, well, so hold on to a law that is damaging to human life to avoid that. To me, it's just complex, and I go, oh man, this could be hard. Yeah, this could be really hard, and it's going to be. It would be increasingly great if the church felt like it weren't on one of the political sides right now. It would be really great if the church felt like a space where the church was saying, hey, we've always been about another spiritual order. Yeah. And we're not one or the two of these. We're not participating in this shuffle. We're also not going to acquiesce to any given view. We're going to stay where we are. We're going to be committed. We're going to continue to love, pray for our enemies. My hope in the broader church doing that is low, which I wish wasn't true. And maybe that's where I need to repent is.
You need to repent.
Is my belief in God's ability to do that. Yes, but I'm just saying, that's where I sit.
Yeah. No, I think as you were talking, I think there are two. The other part of this is that we don't think about consequences. So, for instance, we don't think we want the right to choose, right? And this is a big deal, and it's going to be taken away. But when it comes to abortion, we don't think about the mental health of the people who have multiple abortions. We know, and nobody can deny this, and we have the science. It's terrible to the body of a woman. It's terrible to her mental health. And it's very, very destructive. And guess what?
And to families, and to people who have in their narrative the knowledge that that their life wasn't wanted, even though they lived. I mean, I know those people.
Well, one of the most telling stories about this is I met this kid probably 20 years ago. So I was early 30s, and he was I think he was a teenager, or maybe he was in his 20s, and he had these two tattoos on his arms. And I asked him, well, what are those tattoos? And he said, the name of my kids. And I said, oh, you have kids? He said, no, they're the two kids that my girlfriend aborted. They're my kids, and I couldn't stop her. It has an impact, right?
Absolutely.
It's deeply, deeply effective. Guess what? There are no the government doesn't have the resources to create mental health services for this. Now, let's reverse this, because on the other end, what happens when you begin to say, hey, we'll adopt kids. Hey, don't have abortions. And so people don't choose to do this. Well, usually kids who are adopted, doesn't matter at what stage, and usually children who didn't get aborted and are born into families that don't have the means to take care of them. What happens? Well, they develop a lot of mental health issues. And I think, and I have a little bit of inside knowledge about this, that, we're actually, as followers of Jesus, doing a really good job of reaching out, through crisis pregnancy centers and things like that all over the United States, and caring for people and offering them alternatives and doing a good job. But guess what? But there isn't a consideration in the mental health. The target has to get people not to have the abortion.
Follow-up, and I've seen this too, is like, so the abortion doesn't occur, but then you think about, so even you talk the mother out of it or whatever, but the situation that caused her to start to have these questions is not often enough followed through, discipled through. And so, and I'm not saying that takes away the work of the pregnancy center. It doesn't, but the residual damage that goes into, or even a life of somebody who goes, so somebody had to talk my mother into having me.
Right.
Even that pain, I know adopted people who don't even know why they were adopted and how much.
Yeah, so there's a lot of
pain.
psychology here. There's a lot of mental health that needs to be taken care of. And guess what? We can maybe give the church an A on reaching out and caring for those people who are abortion minded. I would give them a D- overall, taking care of mental health and focusing on the mental health of children who are adopted and who are born into families we just don't help with poverty. We don't help in the same way.
And we don't know how. I think of I was just thinking to myself, I was like, I feel so ill-equipped sometimes to deal with the mental health stuff that I think pops up in our own community.
Sure.
And that and I think that we're a church that cares and is a little more or a lot more tuned into that than most. But in most churches, you've got like one person running the place. They have a theology degree. You can parse out why their system is the right one. And then they've got a couple hundred people that look to them for guidance. And
most of them have about 50, but okay, let's be honest.
Or 50 or whatever the case. But of that 50, 25% at least are dealing with some major mental health issues that this person doesn't know how to deal with. Yeah. And so I'm saying that to say I don't think it's all negligence. I don't think it's that they don't care. It's just a lot of stinking work. It's hard.
Oh, it is. It is.
Yeah, and it's confusing.
Well, it is confusing, but we put a lot of time and energy. Because abortion, if you believe it is murder, or if you believe it is at least taking a life that shouldn't be taken, then that's the thing. Save the life. It is much harder to raise money to help people with their mental health and their aftercare and all those kinds of things. And the other part of it is,
I utterly agree with you on this, but yeah.
I mean, I think we, it's much easier in a world that's increasingly connected to itself, and we can have this conversation in real time in a sense. It's in Paul's time, and in you're sitting there and it's your neighbor.
Right.
It's like the three people, so somebody found a kid in the forest. You went running, you go through the forest to look for the kids every day, and you find one, and then maybe you found three over the last 10 years, and now you're raising them and caring for them, and that's it.
Now you could know about, if you tried even a little bit, you could know about 50 people thinking about getting an abortion in 1 hour. If you put it on Facebook, hey, who's thinking about an abortion? I'd be open to helping with that kid. You'd know about 50.
I mean, I know about the person who robbed the 3 bikes from the neighbor, 4 streets up. I know because I'm on next door, so I know all the things that happen in my neighborhood.
Right.
To all the people I don't know.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
There's so much information,
and that's another thing is we do as the church need to accept that we can't fix it all, but that doesn't mean that we don't engage with that which is near and close and that God presents to us. And if every church just tried that, it would make a massive impact.
Well, and I think the hard part is that in all of these things, you have 2 things. You have your local body and what's happening within your local body, and then you have this larger issues that Christians have to address. Let's say like gay marriage, abortion, maybe depending where you fit on the spectrum theologically, war. So we have these, and then there are more. People can list them out, but they're 100%. They're issues that we believe have black and whites to them, right? This is right, this is wrong. But then what happens is they all filter down into the local body, which is gray. People have a hard time with this idea, but the local body is gray because it's a mission body. It's a body of people who live by an ethic and who follow the risen Christ, but they're inviting people into that, not to a set of rules, but to intimacy. And so
to be transformed by Jesus. And so this is where if you put up all the pillars outside the church that say we are we are anti-abortion, we are pro this, we are anti this, we're pro this. Basically, like, come in here if you agree with all that. We've actually undermined the mission of the church, which is to see people transformed by their proximity to Jesus.
Yeah, and I think that's a hard thing, because we want, when someone says abortion, we want to come down on it in our local gray body.
Right.
We want to say gay marriage, we want to come down on it. Yeah. Now, I'm not saying there aren't points and you say, okay, this is what the Bible says and this is how it's articulated. But when relationship becomes about black and white pillars with which we have to relate together, it doesn't work, and we don't actually care for each other because we're all in these really hard places.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, when I think about my community and my body, and I begin to look at each family, and I'm like, wow, okay, that's not a usual situation. Oh, whoa, wow. They're struggling with all of this. Like, it's complex.
Yeah.
Even and for, when we look at the outside of families and we think, oh, well, that family seems to have it together. 9 times out of 10, no, they don't have it together. Or at least there's crazy things happening that a broken world has brought to them, and their own brokenness has created. So it's like, yeah. So when I think about the abortion thing, I'm like, okay, what's this going to look like? Are we all going to fight over it's a good thing or a bad thing? Are we going to, well, if the government would, do more things, take care of people and blah, 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 or, oh, no, yay, this is a great victory for God, and, judgment on America is going to be removed now. I know. These things, I don't want to have these conversations.
Right. Same. But so having stated that, and I feel the same way about those conversations. What would we hope, just to lean into the positive side, which I need right now. So, but it would be, I'll state something I would hope that and wish for. I would hope that our church as a community would gather together, look each other in the eye, and say, okay, we probably all have come from different places on this, and we're trying to move toward Jesus together. We foresee that this is going to be very difficult in our world, in our country, to deal with, that there will be division, there might be riots, this could bring up these things. How can we redouble our commitment to Christ and to our neighbors to be here and stable and ready to help, serve, love our enemies in this, while also, holding fast to as Christ honoring of thoughts in this as possible. How could we do that? How could we move toward, and just to work that out? That's what I would love my church to do.
Sure.
Yeah. I don't know. That's off the top of my head.
Yeah. And also to interpret persecution not as some great good thing has happened and now you're being persecuted, because I think there will be some forms of persecution when it comes to maybe churches will be in the States desecrated, or maybe maybe if they know you're Christian, they might antagonize you because it's seen as this is a Christian thing that we're pushed to overturn Roe versus Wade. And so, yeah. And I think I think it's a good thing. I do think that there should be better and more progressive laws when it comes to this, and we really need to deal with human beings when we deal with our laws, and we don't normally do that.
And by progressive, you mean,
when I say progressive, I mean people who think about stuff, and I don't mean the progressive side of.
I know that's why I just asked you to clarify that, because
that I can acknowledge a black and white issue and understand its complexity and be willing to make laws that deal with complexity instead of just saying no, this is wrong, and then
because progress doesn't just go in the direction of the group that's claimed the name, right?
Right.
Progress needs to be truly progress.
Yeah. So I mean, I think I hope the church doesn't. honestly, in some ways, I hope the church doesn't celebrate this in a way that's like rub it in your face.
Yeah.
Because what are we celebrating? A lot of mess that's going to pour out under this.
Right.
And we're, like you said, it's probably, there are going to be the states that allow it and the states that don't. And there are going to be battles about it. Yeah. And it's going to be never ending at the local level and the state level.
And it'll probably keep going up to the Supreme Court too. Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't know if it will reduce abortions. That's the thing that I'm concerned about. Will it actually reduce abortions?
And that's a very good question. It would be more like the abortions won't happen in certain neighborhoods that you can choose to, and by that I mean states that you could choose to move to, and the black market of it will obviously increase. And if at the end of the day, if the hope is that it reduces abortions, to just celebrate this as we've won is not accurate.
Yeah. Because we have our work cut out for us. And again, this is just one of the issues. As Christians, the church from the very beginning was successful because it was in the world, but not of the world. It took John 17 seriously.
Yep.
That means that we live out a way of compassion and mercy, and we leave justice to the governing body, and we trust God with vengeance and not taking it ourselves. Right. And I think those are important, because that means that the weak and the marginalized can be part of our communities. But guess what? The weak and the marginalized believe something different than you most of the time. Yeah,
right. And yeah, no, for sure. And I think that's a bit of the complexity that is going to be there. That if this is so, in one sense, the church is to be that light and that salt that is clearly differentiate. It's something else. Mm-hmm. It doesn't celebrate when it wins over you. Right. It is humble.
Yeah,
and it sees the brokenness and mourns it with you. It weeps with those who weep. It rejoices with those who rejoice. It doesn't rejoice over those who weep. And it knows how to bring grace out to the world. Yeah. But at the same time, it is deeply, committed to the glory of God and love of one another, no matter how others perceive that. And so it's an absolutely unique, and it stands out. It's not the same as the state. Yeah. And so I just want it to continue to feel that way, and for people to go, you know what, I don't agree with that body over there, that group, but gosh, they love and take care like nobody else.
Yeah.
What is up with them? I want people to have that experience of the church.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's the hope. The hope is that, that we can offer the love of Christ to people. And here, when I was listening to you talk, I think one of the things, and this is true for me, so even though I'm making a critique of this, is we are, and most of the people listening to this are modern Westerners.
Yep.
We are relatively wealthy.
Yep.
And we like being wealthy, and we like our leisure time.
Yeah.
And we like, we like and I'm going to put this out here for a second. We like taking our kids to our sports.
Yeah.
We like going out to eat.
Yep.
We like shopping on Amazon.
Yep.
We like the house that we have for the most part,
yep.
right? And we love the idea.
You are describing me.
Yeah. We love the idea that our home is going up in value right now, even though we couldn't sell it and buy another house, but we could sell it and buy two others in Cleveland, Tennessee or something like that, or, Nashville. I don't know. Some places where houses are less expensive, but at least here in Tucson, but the problem is that we don't want to be inconvenienced.
Yeah.
We don't, and to care deeply for people is to be consistently and constantly inconvenienced. We look at Jesus and we say, oh, okay, so we're supposed to have our rest time, and Jesus had to run away from people.
Yeah.
He didn't say, oh, hey guys, so I'm headed over to so-and-so's house for the weekend, and I won't be doing any ministry. Right. I'm not going to care for you or anything. No. Jesus had to go run away.
And half the time people seem to find him when he did.
Right. and when we think about following Jesus, we don't think about that, because what you are committing to is the laying down of your life for other people. And I think, when you think about why would a Christian marriage be really remarkable? Why is a Christian friendship really remarkable? It's not because they have really good techniques about doing this. There's one command. It's to lay my life down for you as Christ laid his life down for me.
And they're returning to that, submitting to that.
Yeah.
That's
it over and over again. I think we love that idea. We hate that practice.
Yeah.
And I think whatever happens with the abortion law, however it plays out, as followers of Jesus, we are called to lay our lives down and be severely inconvenienced for people. Not all of us are called to bring people into our home, to adopt, to foster.
And this is also not the only issue that we're called to engage in.
Exactly.
But
we are all called to continually being inconvenienced and find good joy in it. I'll end this little lecture with one thing. Mark, in his sermon on joy, talked about Paul and Silas in the book of Acts, and they're in Philippi. They're beaten with rods, severely. The text says they are put in the inner part of the jail. And what do? They sing hymns and they pray in such a compelling way that all the prisoners are blessed and listen and don't try to escape when the earthquake hits. That's what we're invited into, to be willing to be abused for the sake of the gospel. And a lot of that means for us who love our Amazon and etc., to open all of that privilege to people who don't have it, and be willing to be inconvenienced, and to be willing to be misused. And I think we live in a culture that's so traumatized that everybody is now in the I need to protect myself from trauma.
Right.
Jesus never protected himself from trauma.
He didn't. And that, by the way, is I think both all sides of our spectrums are trying to get away from trauma, which is why you would leave the one state to go to the other one.
Right.
And
I don't mean
put me somewhere where I don't have to have this
stick
argument.
yourself as a vulnerable person in a place where you're going to be taken advantage of and beaten all the time.
100%.
That's not what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But if you actually look at your life, you're in an avoidance pattern most of the time, and in a pleasure pattern most of the time.
Yeah. And when the pleasure pattern is disrupted, you read that as being engaged, being traumatized.
Yes, that has become at least a cultural narrative. And I'm not trying. Yes, we live in an extremely traumatized culture, and that's a true thing. But it's also become something that we use to not engage. And we're not. By the way, we're not Jesus.
Right.
So yes, we're commanded to rest, and we do need to rest in order to care. But the question is, what I want? I want to be able to go to my church and say to every family and to every single person, what's your mission? And they can tell me, God has called my family to serve and care for these people. That's what I want to know. That's what the church is about. A community of people who know both collectively and individually what their mission is, and they're set on it. And so this abortion thing will have an impact on all of us. And some of us we have a mission to this, and all of us have a part in it that we need to engage in. But there's my 2 cents on all that. But
no, that's good. I think that's it, man. I think we've had a podcast.
Oh no, okay. We had a podcast. So and the cricket, he got tired and went away.
He went away. He respected what was being said by the 50-year-old over there. Well, thanks for tuning in. Again, we are imperfect men here who are just we want our churches to follow Jesus, and we invite you into conversations where we talk about what that could look like and various thoughts surrounding all that. So thanks for sitting with us and for your desire to hear our thoughts, and also your mercy on us for our imperfect thoughts. So if you have questions for us, you can email us at faithoverbreakfast@gmail.com. We appreciate those questions. It gives us some fuel for the podcast, though. Man, we have been doing this for a long time. Apparently, we had plenty of fuel in us. We just didn't realize.
Yeah, and there are a couple questions that haven't been addressed yet. I know on the email, and Ashley Kuzno donated to our, so she's a patron of our Faith Over Breakfast. And she donated because she wants to be on the podcast. So
that's one way to get in.
So you want to get in on a podcast and you live here locally, you can click the donate tab, put some money in there, and
look at that.
We'll put you on the podcast.
Look at that. Well, very cool.
So we'll arrange
Ashley.
that. And thank you, Ashley.
And thank you, everybody, for tuning in. So we'll see you next time.
You've been listening to Faith Over Breakfast with Pastor Eric Siepen and Pastor Andy Littleton. Please share us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Thank you.